Thank you so much, Ellen.
There we go.
I just like to welcome everyone and thank them for taking the time this morning to come to our event of the What If series. We're going to talk this morning about what if anti-racism began to be focused at the level of children. And we're very honored and happy to have with us Marcus Washington, who is the current president of the Washington Jesuit Academy. Just a personal note, Mary Jo and I go back not quite 20 years with Marcus when he was teaching history at Gonzaga and taught our son Connor. So it's great to be reacquainted with him, and we particularly look forward to hearing what he has to say. So I have a few bio facts about Marcus that I'd just like to go through here, and then we'll kind of get into it, all right? So Marcus graduated from Gonzaga College High School in 1998, and then from William and Mary in 2003 with a Bachelor's of Arts degree in Public Policy and Government. From 2003 to 2005, he worked as a sixth grade teacher at the Potomac School here in McLean. And while educating students, he also earned his master's in secondary education from Marymount University and an education specialist degree from George Washington University. After his time at the Potomac School, he then taught history at Gonzaga High School, where we met him. And in 2010, he was named the assistant headmaster of the Washington Jesuit Academy and became its headmaster just 1 year later. Marcus now serves as president of the Academy, and he also proudly sits on the boards of Don Bosco Cristo Rey High School, Gonzaga College High School, and Moyne College. He is a member of the Association of Independent Maryland and DC Schools Commission on Accreditation, and he lives in DC with his wife and children, Marcus, Caden, and Ethan. So there you go, Marcus. Thanks so much for being with us, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Don. I want to say a special thanks to Mary Jo and Don for this opportunity. They are two people who I cannot say no to, and I was honored to Connor. And it's always great to be reunited with you all. And again, thank you all for the opportunity to be here with you all today. In order for me to get to where I want to go to, part of what I need to do is to kind of give you my background and tell you my story. One of the things that we want to talk about today is sort of looking at anti-racism, social justice, racial justice, justice in general, from a kid's perspective. And one of the things that I want to do is kind of take you through sort of my own journey, some of the experiences that I had, and how those experiences shaped a lot of what it is that we're doing over at WJ, and really to WJ and give back to the community. And one of the things that I've come to learn throughout my time here at WJ that I'm very proud of is a lot of my success is the success of the communities where I come from, whether it's Holy Comforter, whether it's Gonzaga, and I've been able to experience a lot of people who shared in the joys and success that I've been able to do. And it's something that I'm proud of, the work that I'm doing, but I'm also proud of the people who I'm doing it for and the people who have shared very much in the success that we've been able to go through and have. I love conversational style talking. And I talk very fast, which I'm going to try not to do. So if for some reason you have a question, please feel free to just raise the hand portion. I'll stop and answer the question, but I'm going to take you through a journey, and then we'll come together, take a lot of questions, and really have back and forth. Is that okay with everyone? You can give me the thumbs up. Okay. All right, you're still with me. You haven't logged off yet. I like it. I was born and raised in Washington, D.C., and small inner city Catholic school called Holy Comfort of St. Cyprian. And one of the things that really attracted me to this talk, the What If series, is that my life has been a series of what ifs. There's so many times and pivotal moments where I've thought through sort of what if this didn't happen, or what if this never took place, how much different my life, how much different a lot of people's lives would be if this didn't take place. And one of the things that I've learned at WJ is all of these experiences that I had to go back and use and access and later on in life. I was raised by my mother, and my parents got divorced when I was 6 years old. I was blessed and lucky, and this has a lot of relevance to the talk that I want to give, is that my grandmother was very educated. Her parents they were college educated. They were school teachers living over in Kentucky. And one of the things that I came to learn later on in life is that gave me a huge advantage from an education perspective. My maternal grandfather was from DC, and he died before we were born. And sort of the whole racial inequity played itself out in my family because my grandfather was very, very, very light skinned, to the point where people thought that he was white, and he was married to a black woman. He experienced different forms of racial injustice, whether it's from the black people thinking that he was white, whether it was from him getting treated significantly better than my grandmother ever did overall because of the color of his skin. And so my grandmother, who was very pivotal in raising me, which I'll get to in a minute, her and her sisters, they were also educated. They came to DC during World War II in order to get jobs and to go to Howard University. And it's one of those things where, again, their education level, something that impacted me because I was raised by someone who was college educated. And when we talk about sort of the inequity in education, a lot of it starts from day one. I don't know how many of y'all have studied sort of the word gaps, that by the time a kid is from 0 to 5 years old, it makes a huge difference who they've been exposed to and who they've been taught to, and who they've been taught by. And I made a difference. And it's something that I was just, I'm thankful for, that I never understood until I got older or really got out into the community to see this was something that a lot of people like me didn't have that particular advantage. My father had a different story than my mother, in that he lived over in Southeast. He came from a family that had significantly less money than what my grandmother had, even though she wasn't rich. I would say they were more lower middle class. And in his family, they didn't have a lot of options. He went into Vietnam and enrolled in the military because back then you didn't have very many choices. You weren't going to advance really via education because there was so much inequity in the educational system, especially back then. And I'll talk to you about my experience that. And he went into Vietnam and it messed him up. He was somebody who was sprayed by Agent Orange, and really had to go through all of that. And that was something that would play its role. I share all that story with you is because I was a young man who was raised predominantly, almost exclusively, by women. And that was something that would play itself and play a huge role later on in life, with me. It would continue to affect me. And again, it was one of those motivations as to why I wanted to go back and serve at WJA for some of those reasons, to right some of those wrongs. Now, and again, I was blessed that I was Catholic educated. My grandmother has sent all of her kids to Holy Comforter, which is a school on 15th and East Capitol Street, and it was a predominantly white school. So you grew up hearing about all of the inequities and sort of some of the different things that my family had to go through, but it was a sacrifice that had to be made in order to get a better education than what it is that they would receive elsewhere. And so that was something that continued to shape us. And when it came time, we all went to Holy Comforter, but the school was very, very much different during that time period. And so as I got older, I was always different than my cousins and my brothers. I was more of a neighborhood kid. So when I turned into the 5th grade, I started being able to go out the house, play in the neighborhood, and meet everybody else. And that was the first step when I saw sort of the injustice of the educational system in here. I was able to go to Catholic school. My friends went to DC public schools. And as I got out in the neighborhood and I saw a lot of these young men, they were great kids, just like me. But I also would see their homework, I would see what they were learning, and it was a completely different ball game on over in there. And I just remember seeing all of that and feeling blessed that I got a Catholic education, so on and so forth. But then we had a real transformational experience over at Holy Comforters. We got a new principal who came in there, and she was a phenomenal lady. But I remember she pulled a bunch of the families in of what you would call the smarter kids. She had a talk with the families, and her message was this: you got to get your kids out of here. She said, you got to get your kids out of here. She got sort of a lot of the best and the brightest and started sending them to a lot of your great independent schools, because she knew ultimately there were kids who were in there losing. Now, I got a transformational experience. One of the most transformational experiences I've ever had in my life is that we got an opportunity to go to St. Albans Summer School when I was going to the 6th grade. And to tell you that I had never experienced anything like that would be an understatement. It was an entire different neighborhood. It was an entire different way of being. It was an entire, just everything was different. The kids had a different degree of freedom. And I'm just lost in this whole experience. One of the cool parts is my teacher on the first day at St. Albans Summer School is now on the board of WJA. He came back to help me when I got the job, overall as president. He was young starting out. It was my first time in a predominantly white environment. I remember they were sitting down having a conversation. And this individual was Black, but they were having a conversation about lacrosse. And it was a 20-minute conversation in class about lacrosse. I sank down in my seat. I didn't know what they were talking about. And to talk about you feeling isolated and just an understatement. But one of the things that I learned through that experience of being there for those 6 weeks, I learned more in those 6 weeks than I did in an entire school year at Holy Comfort of St. Cyprian. I learned more in those 6 weeks than I did for an entire year. And that next year was boring. But when I came back to where I was growing up and hanging out, I saw a different form of inequity where I'm looking at my friends, I'm looking at where I'm going to school, and my mentality was, we're losing over here. It's not, we weren't losing, but we are not getting what we need. Very apparent for a kid who was 11 years old to go through and see the difference of what was going on. One of the blessings is I met a friend during that experience, and this would become one of my best friends. And she would later reintroduce me to my wife now. But that's when I met her overall in that environment. And I say this to this day, she has no idea of any of this. She was more of a bridge to me in this community, into that community, because it was one of those, I didn't understand all of what was going on. It wasn't like overall where I was from. And so you go back, you see the inequity that's all going on. You see an inequity that's in your school. And I get to go there for 6 weeks over 2 summers. And then the rest of the year, I'm not learning anything. I was in my own math group overall at Holy Comfort, but it was a safe space. We were good, but you got and saw a whole different form of education that everyone was receiving. So my brother goes to St. Albans in the 8th grade. And when it comes time for me to go to high school, my mother very much wanted me to go to St. Albans. I didn't get into St. Albans a couple of times, but we thought 9th grade overall would be the year. But I went to go visit it. I never felt comfortable there. Never felt comfortable there. I never could get all the way there. And I visited Gonzaga, and I told my mother, I said, this is where I'm going to school. And she got really, really mad at me. And she went off. And she got mad because she was told we weren't going to get enough financial aid to be able to go there. And as a mom, she didn't want her son hoping for something that wasn't going to happen. Well, initially, we didn't get enough financial aid. She wrote a letter begging and saying that, I promise you he'll come back, he'll give back to the school, blah, blah, blah. And I got the opportunity to go there. You got 2 predominantly white environments. One I didn't want to touch and go into. Another I felt very much at home in. And we can dissect that whole concept overall later, because when I explain that to some people, they don't get it, they don't understand. But I can unpack that for you all later if that's something that you all would like. And so I get to Gonzaga and I have a good time. But the difference between me and the other kids were this, even a lot of Black kids, there were things that I was supposed to know that I had no clue about. And everybody expected you to know these things because everybody else knew those things. But I had never experienced any of those things. I didn't have a father in my life. I had never played organized sports before on a team. None of those concepts stuck with me. And so you're trying to play football. I didn't understand you had to come to practice every day. I wanted to go back to the neighborhood where I grew up in and hang out with my friends and go see them. But as I was going back and forth and all of that, I think I quit football my freshman year. They tried to get me to come out for track quit that too. And I was going back to where came from and still trying to take care of my little cousin who they put in aftercare because grandma was a little too older, which I didn't think was fair because we all had never gone to aftercare. Why did she have to go to aftercare? So I'm juggling that. But the neighborhood is starting to change. You know, DC during the time period we were growing up, it was the crack epidemic, late 80s, early 90s. It was a mess all during that time period. So you saw things and just, again, that's why that St. Albans environment, that environment up on Wisconsin Avenue blew my mind away because you saw the difference, you saw the inequity. But, you know, freshman year was good. I enjoyed it, but there were things I was missing out on. So I got together with all of my friends freshman year who were all Black. We all made our schedule together because they said you could get your own schedule. We were happy. We were all going to be in class together. Everything was going to be great. Guess what happened? Everybody else got the schedule that I made for everyone except for me. So I went an entire year without seeing any of my friends, without doing any of that, and I got lost. I was a mess. They tried to get me to come back out for football. I had quit football. And I remind you, my brother, who was older than me, he was a big time football star. So everybody's looking at me like, yo, what are you doing? And I was completely lost. And by luck, or by God, you know, a coach grabbed me, Coach Jackson. He's still like my father to this day. And he had one of those moments. Whenever I give a talk, I always talk about there's times where I say the universe slows down to where minutes become seconds and you can actually concentrate on what is being said to you. Okay. And I need to go back and share one of those moments because it's relevant to the story. And Coach Jackson had one of those talks where he was a gym teacher and he said, look, man, I've seen a lot of kids come through here. He said, look at all these banners up here. I've helped kids with this and that. He said, you can be amongst one of those kids. But he said, you got to stick with me and all of this. I thought the guy was crazy. I didn't believe him, but I had nothing else. I had nothing else to go with. So my goal was I was going to stick with him. And he took me in and he helped me. He talked to me. He talked to me. He listened. He talked to me. He formed me. He did all of these different things because at that point in time, my mother and I, we couldn't connect. A woman cannot show you how to be a man. And I was at one of those points where I needed to learn how to become a man. I needed to learn and understand a lot of those rules but I just didn't know that I needed that at that particular time. So he took me in and he convinced me to come back out for football, blah, blah, blah. And you know, and I came out for football and it was a struggle because I didn't know how to play and do organized sports. And another pivotal moment I had in my life is that I remember I was early on the football team and this crazy guy, crazy white dude, he lived a block away from Holy Trinity and Ghana Holy Trinity. He told me to come to his house. I wasn't going to come to his house, but he backed me into a corner with my mother was around and I had to go to his house. And it was my only second sleepover I ever had. Me and that guy became best friends, grown in our wedding, rest is history. And again, he played a role in part of the reason why my kids are at Holy Trinity right now. But we used to walk past Holy Trinity all the time. I never knew what it was, never knew or understood any of those notions. Yeah. So we all become best friends. Everything is going well and life is good. And I ended up getting a full scholarship, becoming all man. I took off. A lot of people in that community looked out for me, helped me, and it was just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful experience. And at that time, my mentality was race doesn't matter. And, you know, we're all friends, see people for what they were. I learned all of this perfect utopia. And then I go to the College of William and Mary. I had to throw everything, all of that out of the window. It was a whole different ball game and it was a whole different environment. And part of the reason why I went down there is because there were two Black people from Gonzaga who were there. The woman who I told you about, who I met, the friend that would later reintroduce me to my wife, her sister was down in there. And they all said it was okay, a good environment. But I get down in there and the racial tension was palpable. Like you could just, I did not understand the concept of I was going down into the South. I did not understand that concept because I lived in my bubble. I had gone and done my life. And you get down in there, it was the first time when you saw people who looked at you like you were less, who hate. I would call a true minority in there. You could feel a lot of the racial tension sometimes on the football team, and it was hidden, but I could see it in a different way because I had come from a majority white environment, whereas a lot of the people on the team, they came from completely segregated overall environments. And the black people weren't used to hanging with white people, and the white people weren't used to hanging with black people overall down there. That was just the experience of what went through and took place. And I just can remember on the football team, it was so divided. All the white people joined one football team, and all the black people moved off campus and kind of hung out in the apartments. Well, I didn't have a car, and I knew I wasn't going to be able to go over there with them, and I didn't want to go and hang with the football team because there was a lot of hidden racism going on within that white fraternity that was in there. And I was blessed to be able to to be in a freshman dorm with some solid, good people. And within a couple of weeks, they convinced me to join this fraternity overall with them, which was majority white. And it was a hard decision to go through and make because I was going against everybody else. Everybody usually had two options. I chose a third. And I was joining almost an all-white fraternity with people who I didn't know very well. And something about God told me to go do it. And just this was my only shot and it was my only chance because I really wanted to have an authentic college experience. And none of the black people down there really had an authentic college experience. It was one of those, we're going to forego that college experience in order to get a good education, in order to have a great degree so that they could, in name of a better future. But a lot of those individuals didn't have a lot of fun. And I just said, I'm going to go down there and put myself out there and I'm going to go through and I'm going to try. And it paid off very well. But what I learned down there is something that not a lot of black people learn and not a lot of white people understand. I learned the diversity that exists within quote unquote white people, what it means to be rural versus urban, where you come from, how that matters, how that changes your political views by sitting down and being uncomfortable and having these different conversations, especially as a government major. And that experience, while it was hard and while it was unique, it opened my mind up in a variety of ways. And I remember when it came time to get a job, one of my friends' mother, who was in the fraternity, said, "You want to be in education, you need to call my mom. She'll get you a job at the Potomac School." And she gave me my resume and all of that, but she said they didn't want to hire me. And they didn't want to hire me not because I wasn't academically qualified, it's because I didn't speak well enough, is what I was told. And that was my first sort of lesson in how you have to go through and navigate certain spaces. I had gone to William and Mary, I had gone to Gonzaga, double major. On paper, what can you say? But I didn't speak well enough. And that was one of those hidden factors that was in there that you have to go through, overall and overcome when you come to one of those environments. And that was something that I heard, throughout my time period early on in my first couple of months there. And it came from the teachers, not from the parents, not from the kids, but it came from some of the different teachers, is that there was this prescribed way of doing things that you had to go through and do. And my thing is listen, I'm 22 years old and I want to learn how to be a teacher and I care and I'm academically qualified, but I'm also from this environment and I can't be this way all completely. And so that was something that was always, in the back of my mind where I never felt all the way comfortable because of some of those experiences working there. And I remember my friend's mother arguing she said, she just pushed back on him, said, "You all say you want diversity. This guy has this and this, what is it that what's going on here in that regard?" But there were some great people there who looked out for me, who saw the value and saw the worth. But I was a Catholic school educated kid, and it was something about going back to Gonzaga that appealed to me. And part of that had to do with this notion. I was sitting in junior year at Gonzaga as a teacher, as a student. And the English teacher, Miss Free, I said I wanted to be a teacher. And Miss Free stopped the class and was like, "Gonzaga would love to have you as a teacher." And in my heart and soul, I said, no, they wouldn't. And I said, no, they wouldn't, because I never saw a teacher like me other than one time. He never saw anyone like me ever teaching it. The people who I saw were gym teachers. They raised me. the security guards, they raised me too. The maintenance people, they helped raise me. And there were white people there who helped raise me too. But I never saw a teacher who looked like me in there. And I'll tell you what God did to me on my first day there. I walk and I get my homeroom and I'm walking to class. The guy walks in, a black dude walks into class with me. He says, Mr. Washington, he said, you're a teacher, blah, blah, blah. And he looked to the side and he said, man, I thought you were in student services. I thought you'd be in student services. Black kid said that. And I said, man, I know and I understand and I get it. And it was one of those things when I was there, I made sure to say, you're not going to call me Coach Washington. You know, you're not going to call me coach. We're not going to go there. And I have to try to be as legit as I possibly can because I don't want that for the next generation of people. I don't want that being passed along, you know, that type of mentality overall in there. So, you know, I was there for 5 years and I had a wonderful experience. It was a lot different being a teacher versus a student. As a student, I felt free, but as a teacher, I was always being pushed to take on, quote unquote, the Black issues. I just said, I want to be a teacher. I want to do my job. But you want to come and debate with me or take something out on me because some Black kid did something. And I was just, and it was a little hard with some of those individuals, but it's part of the job. It's part of the responsibility that you have. It's just a different responsibility. And sometimes it can be a burden of what you have to go through and deal with. But I got an opportunity, one of those times again, where the moment in the universe slowed down. And, you know, I got an email from Bill Whitaker asking me to apply to be the assistant headmaster at WJ. Bill tried to get me a couple of times and I didn't come because that was something I never felt all the way prepared for. It was something that I didn't want to think about, despite me hearing about WJ in college and going up to Bill and say, I want to come work for you one day. I needed to cross that bridge at Gonzaga of righting that wrong that I'd done to myself, of my perception of not being able to go through and work there. That was something that I wanted to do, and it was definitely the right move. But then I come over to WJA, and experiences I've ever had in my life. 76 kids, 12 hours a day, 11 months of the year, many living in poverty, having all different types of issues. And I'm 29 years old. I haven't had a kid yet. Racial tension somewhat amongst the staff on how do we teach these young Black boys with a limited budget? And people are looking at me because I was the first real Black administrator around the kids, like, how are we going to do all of these different things? And I got my butt kicked. And it was one of those things where I had to draw upon all of these different lessons that I had gone through, that I had seen, in order to really keep the fight going, to give these kids opportunities that I didn't have. And it was a rough experience, but we were able to go through and successfully do it. And it was one of those where we had to learn what it is we didn't know. We had to learn what we could do and what we couldn't do. And it was one of those environment questions you have to ask yourself, what type of school are we trying to be? What are we trying to go and do here? And one of the things that I settled within myself is, and it took me going back and forth, as I said, we're going to turn this into a first-rate independent school, independent private school that just happens to serve underprivileged kids. We're not going to take second to anyone. Anything is not good enough. And I fought with a lot of people because there was this old conservative Catholic mentality in there is that we're just going to save their souls and everything is going to go and take care of themselves. Or that because they're there, everything is going to get better, or this is a good school because they're, no, none of those things are true. And the standard that I always fought with, and there was some bloody wars in there, I said, would you want that for your own kid? And it was funny because you'd be surprised how many people would stop and say, well, this is different. Well, why is it different? And that was the standard that we always go about is that we want what we would want for our own kids. And we're going to fight to have the same standard, the same everything. I wanted this to be the Gonzaga or the Georgetown Prep or the Potomac School for these young men. And we had to go through and we had to fight to go and do all of these different things. And I had to teach, along with many others, how are we going to prep our kids to go into some of these environments that are unfamiliar to all of those things. And I had to use and access a lot of those different experiences that I had learned and to really be able to help these young men navigate some of these different social circles, which was something that was very, very difficult. I watched young men run into, oh, it's the same thing they did. He didn't speak well enough. But then when they get the kid through sheer pressure and fight, they talk about how wonderful the kid is. All of these different barriers that these young men had to go through, on top of not having enough money, on top of low expectations, and just really navigating all of these different circles. Really, and it's been a beautiful thing to watch the growth, to watch the transformation. When I first got to WJ, everyone looked at our kids as a charity case. It was a charity case. It was, oh, well, we'll take one. Oh, well, this, and oh, well, that, and, this and that. But the beautiful thing is to watch over the 14 years is there's no charity case. You have schools that see our kids as assets, and they can articulate why our young men are assets overall in their community. And one of the things that I had to learn a different way is that, especially when I became president, is that there are a lot of people who give checks to WJ and they thank us. And they thank us because they say WJ has helped me grow. WJ has helped me learn and helped me become a better person. That was something that, years ago that I didn't always see or understand really going. And the other thing that I had to learn for myself is when I first got to WJ, I didn't like where the school was, and I couldn't understand why so many people, especially these older white individuals, and it was my ignorance, why they loved the school, why they supported the school to a certain degree. And I came to learn, and I've seen this time and time again, which is a beautiful thing. There's so many people who felt like they could relate to our kids because they were poor Irish Catholics who came through and made it, and they had their kids, and but they see the struggle of our kids, and it's something that on a human level that they can see and they could go through and relate to. And the reason why they made it is because some priest or somebody gave them an opportunity. And that's been very, very beneficial for me to go through and learn and see, to open and expand my mind to all of the different paths that different people have taken, along the way. Another point I want to talk to you about WJA, which has always been hard, is we're a tuition-free school. And because we're a tuition-free school, we have to be very careful about how we do things. And I say to our teachers, in the midst of all of these identity politics and everything that goes on, I say, listen, WJ is a place that brings people together. I say, what do you mean? I say, we take on some of the roughest, most controversial issues. They all meet at our door: race, socioeconomic status, religion, education. They all meet right there at our door. And we have different people with different perspectives from different walks of life who all feel very strongly, and they all feel like they have a part in understanding of how we do things overall at WJA. We have to be very, very particular about how we navigate all of these deals, because ultimately we don't want any of that stuff distracting what our young men need in order to be successful. We need to focus on the main things: reading, writing, arithmetic, being a great person, okay? Being able to imagine and dream about their future. Those are all the things we're trying to do. But more importantly, we're trying to teach our young men how to think, but also how to think for themselves, so that when they get out in the real world or get out in the high school, they can figure out what it is they truly believe. But before we start telling them what they should believe, we need to give them the tools from which to be able to go through and think for themselves, which is a hallmark of a Jesuit education. I've talked too much. I want to take some questions because I can go and ramble all day, and it's hard over Zoom when you can't feel and read the room. But just what questions do you all have, or something that you want to know more about? Because I have more stories and more things that I can talk through and help maybe explain.
I have a
Ashley?
question, Marcus.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for being here. I really have enjoyed listening to your story. I am a parent of a 15-year-old son who attends Gonzaga.
Yep.
And so what is advice that you give parents of this age? I mean, because I'll be honest with you, he went to Holy Trinity.
Yep.
We haven't navigated racial issues that he's confronting or witnessing or seeing as a
Yep.
high schooler. So what do you coach young men to do when I keep hearing stories or incidents, and not just at Gonzaga, I know it's being recorded now, but around here, like when they get to that pivotal age, when they are
Yep.
not in the safety of a lower school mentality or whatever.
Yep.
What is some advice to navigate this well, these issues?
Yep, a couple of things. Number one, I would say is teach your son to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. Putting him in different environments that challenges his norms or his way of thinking and what is his real world to the best you can. That's something that's going to pay significant dividends later on in life for when you get to college, before you get into the workforce. I can't tell you how many people you run into in the workforce that's never encountered Black people on a human level, personal level, in terms of having to go through and work with each other. Also having an open mind and open heart. I got to college. I met a young man from Texas. His entire way of looking at the world was completely different. We were total opposites, yet we were the exact same. We fought, we argued. By a lot of things that came out of his mouth, he would be canceled, condemned as racist, blah, blah, blah. But he loved me, and I knew that he loved me. One of the groomsmen in my wedding to this day. Teaching your sons how to think and look at something from someone else's perspective based on where they live, based on their experiences, and one of the most valuable tools you can do. But the one thing I would say is the earlier you can do all of that, the better. Because having had authentic relationships with people who don't look like you, having been a minority in an environment will expand your thought process in a way that is more educational than anything they can learn overall in school. Experiences, especially when you're a minority, especially when you're uncomfortable, is going to teach you some things on an individual, cause you to reflect over many, many years. And we can talk about all of this academic, this is how you get to this, but there's a social education that is extremely valuable, and in my opinion, will pay even more dividends than what some of the academic education that you receive. I learned more in the soup kitchen than I did in most classes. I learned more on the football field or in the locker. I learned more about office politics in the locker room of playing football than I did anywhere else. But putting your son in different environments and making sure that you look at his education, not just from an academic perspective, I think will pay dividends. And encourage your son to go sit at a table with some people who don't look like him for a couple of days in a row and see how that shapes and changes his mentality going through overall. Son, very much so. Mary? You're on mute, Mary.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yes.
So from my perspective, one of the questions I have, I worked in schools for pretty much a gazillion years and as a school psychologist. But from your perspective, to what extent or in what way should racism and systemic racism and what we used to call, or maybe we still call, prejudice, be addressed directly in the classroom in terms of actually like direct discussion or lessons as opposed to just, well, make sure, you eat lunch with somebody, but to what extent directly can it be addressed?
And that's a tough question. And I'm going to start with a story. Okay. And it was a story I forgot to tell you. I was raised by my grandmother, and my grandmother was one of the most well-read individuals like you'll ever meet. A lot of people my grandmother was different, and she just read. And I remember one time I was in the 8th grade, and I was about to go outside and play and go with my friends. And she had found my homework for my history assignment. And it was the most defeated I've ever seen my grandmother. She was not an emotional person, but it was the most defeated I had ever seen her. And she said, Marcus, I can tell you where we were in the house. I don't remember how it finished. She says, Marcus, is this what they're teaching you in school? She says, I was alive during this time period. She said, I lived through this. She said, this isn't true. And she had erased my answer on the question, said, this isn't true. And my response to her was a typical 8th grade response. Well, Grandma, if I don't put this answer down, I'm not going to get a good grade on this assignment. This is what I have to go and do. And I just saw the look on her face, Mary, and it's one of those things that it always went through and stuck with me. The problem we have is this, and I'm not going to necessarily give you the solution. History, a lot of times, is taught by the winners. And when I was around there, talked about trying to have conversations with one of my friends who went to Holy Trinity in there, and I was trying to explain to him, this is back in 1995, about what the police officers would do. I couldn't penetrate that brain. The George Floyd stuff never was I was little like, this has been going on but people did not know or understand all of that. But when you try to tell people what they haven't heard from the news or from it's really, really hard to go through and penetrate. I think one of the best things that you can do from a school perspective to challenge systemic racism, and you're going to get a lot of pushback on that, is to really get people to think for themselves, to really teach people how to think and challenge norms. Instead of telling everybody what took place, set a context for some of these historical figures. What might really be going on overall in this story? What might he really be thinking? Go put yourself in this person's shoes, teaching these people how to imagine. One of the best exercises that I've learned I learned through the Jesuits, through the spiritual exercises, is imaginative prayer, is to really be able to put yourself in someone's perspective. That is something that a lot of schools are uncomfortable doing because people teach what they know and people teach, what mainstream society goes through and tells them. And I know I'm not answering your question directly, Mary, but what you can do is teach people how to see each other as human beings with the hope that that's going to pay dividends later on. I feel like with a lot of these conversations about racism, this is just my personal opinion, I'll probably get in, a lot of people aren't going to like this. We spend so much time talking about how different we are. We all talk about what we have in common.
Yeah, I just think there's also not probably at the Jesuit schools or maybe
Yes.
in general the private schools, but there's so much pressure in certain states, especially,
Bingo.
you can't talk about it. You will make our children feel guilty.
Yep.
I mean, I'll be honest, my children who are now in their 30s didn't feel guilty when they learned about history and slavery. They thought it was awful. That's all. But and I'm not sure, again, I'm thinking that in the Jesuit school, you have more latitude to say, hey, let's
Bingo.
talk about the news. What do you think that person was thinking? But in general, is that something?
But in general, Mary, the best thing you can do is what I would say, keep them in the game of learning and keep them in the game of thinking about all of these different things. Trying to really explain that. I mean, I had this conversation with adults. I said, so when the civil rights movement took place, you think everything just ended and stopped? There are a lot of people who think that. I said, when did all of this change? Give me the year.
Yeah.
You're fighting against a system, Mary, that is very, very difficult to change. But my belief has always been you do it one person at a time. And a part of it is really getting your kids to think outside of the box, to put themselves in and teach them what you know. I learned a lot from my grandmother, and Mary, you have a whole different perspective than what you had 25 years ago. I think it's very important that you talk to your grandkids overall, if you have any. I'm sorry, I don't mean to assume, but from that particular perspective to enhance their mind a little bit overall on those issues. But to me, the way I know how to do it is one person at a time. The other thing that I'm seeing in these schools, which is going to come across as controversial, they're jamming some of this stuff too far down people's throats and minds, and they're having a negative reaction to all of this, and they're just hitting. I don't know if that's the most effective way of bringing people together. In that regard, I appreciate the intent and the effort, but some of this is turning people off. So the moment you talk about racism and diversity, everybody just shuts down. Just shut down immediately. It's like, I'm sick of it. I don't want to hear all of this. And that's something that you got to be cognizant overall of too. But teaching independent thinking, teaching empathy, teaching values that should be applied universally, regardless of the color of skin. That to me allows an individual to continue learning in this regard because it's an ongoing journey. When you heard me talk, there were things I had to learn well into my 40s, I had to put down some of my own stereotypes or the way I was looking at people. It's an ongoing journey that doesn't get solved, but you can enhance people's ability to learn at a much earlier age if you do some of those things, is what I believe.
Thank you very much.
Barbara?
Barbara, you're on mute. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, I agree very well with what you're saying. That the best thing we can do is just teach empathy to other people. You know, from experience, my family lives in Florida,
Mm-hmm.
and my sister's partner, when the racial tensions broke out last year because of what happened in Tennessee, and the demonstrations were peaceful, but the news in Florida painted a whole different story. And my sister's partner called here at that time. We were going to go to Old Europe. My dad had just passed last year, so she was up here helping with the packing. And the whole thing, she said, Barbara, Steve is calling. He's forbidding us to go out. And she said, you know why? And I said, yes, because there were demonstrations.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that it's, how do you teach empathy to people, you know, of a different, what's the word, a different mindset?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And part of it is Barbara, is that your question? I just want to make sure I'm not interrupting.
Yeah, that's my question.
I think that is where we start with young kids.
Mm-hmm.
It's the empathy element. And I think one of the things that I never realized how segregated America really is. And I never realized how different some of these regional, racial tensions that go deep, much deeper than can be discussed or talked about on a national level. And the reason why I don't like trying to address or talk about some of these things on a national level is because different people, especially the people who tend to be controlling the conversation, they haven't dealt with their trauma that they've had to go through and do. The times when they get there, they're talking about themselves, and their pain hasn't healed, and it may not ever heal, but some of it is venting. I think that a lot of it starts with empathy, and a lot of it starts with being able to go through and think independently. But there are things that have taken place in those regions that have caused these people to think this way, trying to go and peel back the onion on some of these issues and say, why is this person thinking and operating that way, is a first step in creating that empathy. And when I say empathy is, even though these people you may not agree with, it's this, where does that come from? Why do they go through and think that way? I've been able to change a lot of people's minds, or at least open up their hearts a lot more, or to be a little more empathetic by us being in the room together. The more you can bring people together, the more you can do it, especially at an early age, the better overall it's going to be. But the one thing that we got to keep doing is whatever your principles are and your values are, that's something that can't be compromised or changed because of the color of someone's skin. And that's one of the things that often happens is the narrative gets rewritten when it's somebody Black, because now all of a sudden it's different. It's not, we want this academic pedigree, we need someone who speaks a certain way. Well, you've never said that about anyone else until this Black person came up. That's the thing that we have to try to push people to do, is to be real consistent with your values and apply those universally. Mary and Bob.
Thank you, Marcus. It's a very powerful story. And one of the things you kept saying when you were telling your story, you kept talking about moving back and forth from one environment to another, and how different they were, and how you had to adapt.
Yeah.
My question is, you've been at WJA for a long time.
Yeah.
And what are your graduates from WJA telling you about their experience moving into high schools or colleges where there are different environments? What are they telling you about it?
Telling us, thank you. They said, you prepared us for all of this. So let me tell you a couple of stories to help better answer that question, Bob. I first get to WJA, right? And I found out as the assistant headmaster. I found out the headmaster was leaving. I didn't want to do the job. I wasn't going to take the job. Well, didn't know if I was going to apply for the job because I didn't think I was a political candidate. Okay. So I go to our sponsorship luncheon, and it was a hard thing to watch because it was all of these Black kids with all of these white donors overall in the environment. Okay. And I remember the other Black person who started with me looked at me and said, "Is this something you could have done when you were in middle school?" And I said, "Hell no." Okay. But the flip side of what I just said is our young men have learned confidence, how to talk to people who don't look like them, and they understand that there are people out there who care about them. And with the strong role models that we've had in here, we've been able to prep them to be confident that they can walk into any environment. But we've actually given them an opportunity where you remove all of these barriers, Bob, where they can actually figure out who they are. And in this world, everybody's trying to indoctrinate all of these kids and tell them all of these things, what they should be. And we're actually able to give them an opportunity to figure out who they are. They're telling us, thank you, that we gave them the confidence and the ability to figure out who it is they want. Another thing we've been able to do, though, Bob, and this has been hard, because I grew up in the area, right? And I know so many different people, especially Black people, who've gone to all of the different private schools. We're able to direct certain kids into environments that will maybe that will fit their personality a lot better. A lot of these schools will say, well, we want diversity. That means they want a Black kid. Well, you know what? Who that kid is does not fit with the culture in your school. And it's not just because he's Black. What do you mean, Marcus? This kid is more suited for a GDS-like environment. This kid is more suited for a Georgetown prep environment. And it blows people's minds away when I try to sit down and have these arguments or conversations with some of them, because they don't see definitely the diversity in terms of the personality or whatever. Here's the thing. And I got in an argument one time with these two women who were talking. They were saying something about Gonzaga and all of these white boys from Montgomery County, blah, blah, blah. And I kind of went off and I said, you know what? I said, if you go to Gonzaga, class of 98, and I said, you know who they tell you the poster child for the school was? Me. And they didn't know what to say to that. And these are people who worked at WJA. They worked at WJA, but they never assumed, you know what I mean? Like, but that's the mindset that we have to go through and change. What are the qualities that this individual has that aligns with the values and the personalities of the other kids? Am I making sense? Am I sounding crazy? But that's what we've been able to do as a school, is direct the kids' personality, their interest, to a school environment that will suit and foster those values and foster those qualities. But that's something that not a lot of other people know, because everybody, especially the Black family, is trying to get to the school with the best name. But a school with the best name doesn't necessarily align with who you are and your overall values and with your personality and with your beliefs. But to try to sit down with some people and say, that kid's better for Georgetown Prep versus McNamara, that'll blow their minds away. Did I answer your question, Bob?
Peggy.
Peggy? Peggy,
Hi there, thank you. I have an opportunity to work with a local rec center. The new director, young Black woman, open mind. It's a community that serves in Montgomery County. Historically Black neighborhood, have some low-income apartments, and historically Jewish neighborhood. You know, obviously the times in the 50s when Jews couldn't buy houses in Montgomery County, but this neighborhood is. Anyway, it's a wonderful neighborhood. I love the place. And the new director wants to focus on, she says, we've got lots of programs for little kids and lots of programs for seniors, but we don't have anything for middle schoolers and teenagers.
Yeah.
And I guess I have two questions, really. What advice would you give us on programs to try to institute there? Yep. And then the second one is, I think there's a lot of expectations that I would lead the advisory committee because our president just died. But I don't think an old white woman's going to have a whole lot of credibility in that group. And I'd like your thoughts on that. I mean, it's not the other advisory committee, there's Black people on it. I might be the only white person on it, maybe at this point. I want to recruit more people to it. And
Yeah.
anyway,
Peggy, I would first and foremost, I would challenge you on the old white woman piece.
okay.
In the regard of my mother, who was not the most open-minded individual, met an old white woman at Gonzaga. She nodded her head and said, "This woman, I can give her over to you." And that woman was like another mom, spoke at her funeral. Okay, legendary woman. Let's not talk about what you're not. Let's talk about what you are. And people, our kids at WJA, kids are beautiful because kids see through so many different things. They really do. They expose you for everything. Okay. And when you're really there for them, and when they see the love and the care that you have for them, they can weed through all of that. Okay. So don't limit yourself in that regard. But while understanding there are some things that you may not be able to go through and understand, but Peggy, there are things with all of our kids that I can't understand too. So come from a place of love, come from a place of openness, come from a place of I'm here to help. And you know what? I might not be able to impact everyone, blah, blah, blah. But you know what? I'm here for the right reasons and I want to help. And you'd be surprised how long that's going to go through and take you. My point is this: when you ask about the middle schooler programs and what to institute, my recommendation with you is get with the people and see what they want and see what they need and talk to them. Don't just assume. Go and walk with them and sit down and talk about what would help and what would affect you. And that at least gives you a starting ground from which to go off of in that regard. And I think that's going to go through and take you very much a long way. Peggy, you had another?
Parents or the kids or both?
Both.
Yep.
Because ultimately in education, we're in the customer service business. And when I first got to WJA, it was these arguments where we had all of these teachers and they were just like, well, they got to learn this, they got to learn that. But it's like, they don't want to learn that. So what are we going to do? Fight the whole time? Are you doing this for you or are you doing this for them? Let's talk to them, give them somewhat of an ownership in their education. And then once they have the buy-in and the hook, then you can bring them to where they ultimately need to be. But it comes from a place of love. And this is how we can work together and go through, because people are going to see if you have that fear or if you have that lack of confidence because you're white. You know what I mean? They're going to go and the kids are going to see through all of that. And they're ultimately not going to respond as positively to somebody who's there we had a guy. He was a volunteer at WJ. He was a Pulitzer Prize winner, just author. He was great. Older white dude. He even had early on stages dementia. The kids absolutely loved him, and they loved him because he wanted nothing from them. He just loved being there, and he loved being with them. And everybody loved him, and it was infectious. And it was just because he loved the kids and he loved being there, and he didn't want anything overall from them. And it was a beautiful thing to sit there and watch this guy because he was there. And then we've had other people who were there because they wanted to feel like they were saving the world. Right. And you know what? They struggled a little bit instead of just walking and seeing, overall and being with them. My message to you, though, Peggy, is just talk to them, sit down with them. You know what I mean? And then go from there and come from a place of commonality. Like, look, I did this, I did that. This is where you need to be. I'm here because I want to help, blah, blah, blah. And keep an open mind and open heart. And you'd be surprised how many more people you're going to grab and bring with you if you approach it from that perspective, in my opinion.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. What other question? Yes. Where did they go? Mary Jo and Bob?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have your hand up, Bob?
So you've talked a lot about preparing your kids. I also assume that you have an opportunity, for example, at least with Gonzaga, to prepare the ground for when your guys arrive. Do you spend any time or any effort doing that?
No, we do. We have a graduate support program that works with our graduates where we track and we follow them. And they're able to, go through and they'll call me. Gonzaga's been really good to our school in the sense of I appreciate that they've understood. Every kid I've sent to Gonzaga in 14 years has made it through and graduated. Now, we haven't lost one kid. Not one kid. They'll tell you that right now. Not one kid. And at one kid. And how many schools can say that? Now, do we got to be perfect? But again, how many schools can say that? And part of it is they understand and it's mutual respect. And I'll tell you sometimes where they had to check me, they understand that value of our kids, that what they bring to the community, but they also understand is because I sat in on the admissions committee, because I went there, I understand more of the formula of what they're looking for and who can go and thrive in that environment. We have many, I've actually talked more kids out of going to Gonzaga than I ever had into going to Gonzaga, just because I understand how great the school is, but I understand some of the limitations of certain schools and of certain environments overall for kids. But what I can tell you is that I had the admissions director one time get on me. He's a good friend of mine. And he said, Marcus, stop counting applications. Because we would always count applications because we didn't want someone messing up another kid. He told me to stop counting applications. We'll figure out how to get the money for the kids that need to go through and be here, which I really appreciate it. And overall, it's just a beautiful thing. And it's been great watching other schools say, you know what, we need your kids. Our school, we'll figure out how to go and fund X, Y, and Z.
Thank you.
Yep. But again, Don, a lot of what I wanted to do at WJ, or what we wanted to do, is I wanted this to just be like my experience at Gonzaga or other people's experience at these wonderful schools, and let's just give it to these kids, and let's not make it anything other than we're going to do these same values, these same Jesuit values, this mentality, this same emphasis on brotherhood, this emphasis on sports as a way of learning, this emphasis on service. That's all we want to go and do. What other questions or anything?
If I could,
Mhm.
I am a little blown away here. This was fabulous. I think this was a wonderful talk for every single age. Grammar school parents, junior high parents, all of us in life, walking through life. There are so many points that you made about, just be yourself and see and open your mind to other things. It really has been fabulous. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're very busy at this time of year, but thank you so much.
No, I appreciate it. The one thing I just want to take away is that a lot of times throughout my life, I saw my limitations, or I saw myself perceived limitations. Some of them were rooted in race. And I appreciate greatly all of the people, black and white, who came back to help and support me. And I just remember when I didn't know, when I became the headmaster at WJ, I didn't know what that meant to so many other people. Not just black people, just my students, people like, just when I came back to my reunion, that was a big deal, and just seeing all of that. And it's just one of those things where there are a lot of positives and a lot of good things that we all need to draw upon, and not necessarily spend as much time talking about how different we are. And it was just so many parents who came and said, we got to make sure Marcus wins, or make sure that this wins and successful because he's one of us. The one thing I appreciated, and when I said I didn't know if I wanted to apply to be the headmaster of WA, because I didn't think I'd get it, because I only had 3 months of administrative experience. And I didn't think I had politics in my favor. But when I saw the sponsor luncheon, and I saw all of the people whose kids I taught, and all the people who were like, to go through, it meant a lot to me, because I realized it was like one of those things. There are a lot of people who, black, there's white, and as I like to say, there is an element of purple, and that element that I experienced, and I appreciated, those individuals who came and just backed and supported me. So, yes.
Thank you. I can see that your talk being a reprise for next summer when everybody's hanging out there. So rather than Christmas.
Yeah. Okay, everyone.
I have one more, and
Yep.
I just want to thank you again so much for being with us, and also give you an opportunity to say something about what we as individuals or as a community could do for you as you go forward.
Thank you very much for that, Don. Just continue to spread the good word about the mission of WJ and what we're trying to do. connecting us with resources or different opportunities overall for our young men. What we're trying to do is create networks, the same networks that you get coming from a prestigious high school, just access to different avenues, and just informing us donors, just anybody who's interested in the mission or anybody who's interested in just reaching back and helping someone who has a particular skill set. We want to hear from those people. It takes a village to do what it is that we're doing. It's taken so many people, past and present, so many wonderful, selfless individuals who care. They want to make a difference, and they check their egos at the door to try to help the next generation of people. And the reason why I'm here is because you've heard the stories about all the people who helped me. And I often think about, what if those individuals didn't help me? What if I went to St. Albans? What if all of this? And it just brings me back to the mission of, we're doing God's work. God has a plan for all of us. How do we help the next generation of people continue to go through and be successful? How do we pay our blessings forward? Because I'm a firm believer, if you pay it forward, you'll get it right back.
And did you have a question? And D'Onofrio? Okay.
Okay, everyone, or we
good?
Well, I appreciate the opportunity, Mary Jo and Don. Thank you all so much. Any of you all ever want to come and visit the Washington Jesuit Academy, we'd love to have you, and have a wonderful day. And thank you all for what
Thank
you're
you.
doing.
You too.
And I
You
really
too.
appreciate your interest in all of this.
Okay.
Thanks, Marcus.
Thank you, Marcus.
Many
Take
blessings.
care now.
Been great.
We'll see you
Thank you.
soon. We'll see you soon.